So, I hope that as we're almost kind of doing a commentary on a subject, a topic. And the topic, of course, if you remember right, is what it looks like at the end of the tribulation. Now, I know the tribulation lasts 7 years. That's clear. Daniel tells us one more week for Jacob. However, I am not convinced that that when Jesus comes back, everything is just magical and his kingdom appears and everything's hunky-dory. I think that some things happen. I'm convinced of it. I'm not sure if I've convinced you along the way, or the Bible, I should say, has convinced you along the way. But we're going to look at a few things tonight that are very interesting. And the more I look, the more ancient these things are. And the more forth-telling or future-telling they are. And we're going to get into some very interesting things tonight. A couple of these things you may have seen over the last couple of years on Tuesday or something. We'll rehash a little bit. But I'm going to show you a couple things that are very interesting. I don't want to dig into some things that are controversial. That's really not what I'm trying to do. What I am trying to do is expand our idea of the future, biblically. I'm trying to make us dig into the Bible and see if these things are so. And Joe and I and Gary and I have been talking about this stuff, and we have come to the conclusion, I've heard them all say, that especially in the last 50 years, you don't hear this stuff taught, and you just glean over it. You just kind of skip over it, and I think that's a disservice. I think it's a disservice. So let's get into Numbers 24, and you're going to remember that this, and I know I showed you a picture of Psalm 83. We're going on to that. In fact, if you can see up here on the right side of my screen here, there is a Psalm 83 list. And we're going to start documenting some tribes or some enemies of God's, of Israel's, that are promised to be dealt with. And so it'll lead us up to Psalm 83. Now again, the controversy nowadays, there's several of them. If you think about the pre-trib rapture, the mid-trib rapture, all these kinds of things. One of them is the Psalm 83 war. Is it a war? Is it just simply a prayer? I know maybe a few of you have heard that, but let me just say up front that if you read Psalm 83 and you want to turn there now, you can just glance over it. Psalm 83 is a prayer by Asaph, who is a prophet of David's. It says in 2 Chronicles, he is a prophet under David. And so he is saying a prayer, but it's actually a plea. It's a plea. And those things that are pled for, can I say it that way, in Psalms, the book of Psalms, are going to come about. Now, like Joe likes to say, we wish they would come about a little sooner, Can we have a little, balance or something, a little bit more of your power now, God? Come out and show us your swords or your help a little bit more. But they are going to be done, and they're going to be done, I think, again, what the Lord said to every jot and tittle. I think he meant it. And we're going to see a little bit more of that. This is that famous prophecy, set of prophecies by Balaam. You remember Balaam? We've mentioned him, I think, here tonight, on Sunday night a couple times. He is a prophet. He's a false prophet. Some say that he's a prophet of Israel. He's a Jew. That's wayward. Some say that he was a local Canaanite prophet. That they had a practice there. They would take animal bones and throw them, and they would read them, and all these kinds of stuff. People throw him in with that. We do know this, that he is said to have led Israel into sexual sin. And you remember that that's how Israel finally fell. Balaam was a part of that, it says in the New Testament. How did he have that power? Was he, did he become friendly and powerful with the Jews, or was he a Jew? We're not quite sure. But we know that King Balak said, I will hire you to go curse Israel. And you remember the donkey? The donkeys talk, right? Well, yeah, God's donkeys do. And so you remember Balaam, the donkey had to kind of drag him there, and God had to kind of drag him there, and then there were several prophecies. We're going to look at one in particular tonight, okay? So Numbers 24:2, we'll start there. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, the people of Israel shall camp each by his own standard. This is in Numbers 2. I should have preempted this. No. This is Numbers 2. We're going to start out with it because I want to show you something. In Numbers 2, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, the people of Israel shall camp each by his own standard. Now, most people think that that's their color. Remember, each tribe had a color, okay? And so their standard was a certain color. And then with the banners of their fathers' houses, okay? So there was a standard and then a banner which had an emblem on it. It had a picture of something. Watch what this is. They shall camp facing the tent of meeting on every side. Those who camp on the east side toward the sunrise shall be of the standard of the camp of Judah by their companies. You don't have to really keep up with me, but I'm just going to show you some numbers, and I'll show you a picture, okay? The chief of the people of Judah was one banner, okay? It was one banner. Remember, he had a standard, but he also carried the banner for his companies, Judah. And so under these would be named the fathers of some houses, and the numbers are given. 75,000, I'm rounding 54,000, 57,000. In verse 9, all the list of the camp of Judah, the total is 186,400. Okay, it doesn't mean anything to us. We come to this number, we skip over it, right? It doesn't really matter, but it becomes very interesting. They shall set out first. So Judah's going to set out first with their 186,000 plus. On the south side, Reuben, 46,500. Next to him, Simeon, 59,300. The tribe of Gad, 45,600. All of those of Reuben were 151,450. They shall set out second. Then the tent of meeting shall set out with the camp of the Levites. So they were in the center. Okay, the Levites are in the center. On the west side, Ephraim with 40,000, Manasseh 32,000, Benjamin 35,000. All of those of Ephraim were 105,000. On the north side was Dan, 62,700. Next to him was Asher, 41,500. Then Naphtali, 53,400. And those listed of Dan were 150, let's say 8,000. They shall set out at the last. Dan's going to set out last, standard by standard. If you line them up in the desert, that's what it looks like. Now, some suggest, well, no, this doesn't make sense because they all have to be facing east, or they all have to be facing toward the Levites and those kinds of things. These are, if you see them in the long lines, they are. They wouldn't be equal, so that doesn't make a little sense. So what do we have to turn them around? We have to turn them all so that these are running this way. And these are running this way. But then you're going to be to the northeast and the southeast, and you're going to be pretty discombobulated. So what I'm suggesting is, and I like this idea, I'm not saying it's a matter of a fact, but it makes sense to me the way I read it and the way the commentaries play out. It makes sense to me that when Balaam is down, because you're going to watch what he sees, okay? When Balaam looks down from the mountains onto Israel, the tents of Israel, as they're camped there, this is what he sees. This is what he sees. The Jewish tradition says, this is just a caveat, by the way, Jewish tradition says the four standards under which Israel camped in the wilderness: to the east, Judah was a lion, Dan's was an eagle, to the west, Ephraim was an ox, and to the south, Reuben's banner was a man. Where do we see that again? Where do we see that again? In Ezekiel 1. I looked and saw a whirlwind coming from the north, a great cloud with the fire flashing back and forth and brilliant light all around it. In the center of the fire was a gleam like amber, and within it was a form of 4 living creatures. And this was their appearance. They had the human form, but each had 4 faces and 4 wings. Each had the face of a man, and a lion, and an ox, and an eagle. In Revelation 4:6. And around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures, full of the eyes in front and behind. The first living creature like a lion, the second like a ox, the third like a man, and the fourth like an eagle. Now there, I'm going to be frank with you. There's some disparity with the tribe of Dan, because it says in his prophecies, the other ones line up. You're going to see some of this, but his suggests water. But remember, Dan went south. Dan had to be judged, and the emblem of judgment is an eagle. So that's how some would suggest that the eagle played in there. But anyway, now of course Balaam is not going to see this, but this is with the emblems of each tribe carrying their standard. That's the colors of their standard. There's the faces of the 4 banners with the holy place in the middle and the Levites in the middle. Now, when you get to the throne in heaven, what do you think you're going to see? We honestly don't know, but we know that the gates are there with these colors. We know that the Holy of Holies is in the middle of everything. And so this is going to be very interesting to see, because as we said before, and it really is evident, some people suggest, in fact, Chuck Missler suggests, that it's almost like a hologram, that heaven is above. And these, remember, Paul says these are a shadow of things to come. And whatever is happening in heaven, remember the prayer? Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There's a hologram or a shadow of things on the earth. And so it'll be very interesting to see what plays out. So that was just for fun, okay? Don't take that, just take that with a semi-grain of salt. But those 4 faces are in Ezekiel and Revelation. So back to Numbers 24 and this ancient prophecy about Christ coming to dominate in his kingdom, and something very interesting that we're going to find here as well. When Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go, as at other times, to look for omens, but set his face toward the wilderness. And Balaam lifted up his eyes and saw Israel camping tribe by tribe. Now, however that looked, this is what Balaam saw. And this is interesting to note here, because it's important that whatever he saw, whether there was a cross or whatever, he saw the camps of Israel, and I think it moved him. The Spirit of God moved him as he saw the camps of Israel, because the Spirit of God came upon him. And said, the oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eye is open. He saw, his eye is open. The oracle of him who hears the words of God, who sees the vision of the Almighty, falling down with his eyes uncovered. How lovely are your tents. He said, there it is again. He's seeing something, and it's moved him by the Spirit of God. O Jacob, your encampments. O Israel, like palm groves that stretch afar, like gardens beside a river, like aloes that the Lord has planted, like the cedar trees beside the waters. Water shall flow from his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. His king shall be higher than Agag. Why did I do that? Because Agag, he doesn't show up till 1 Samuel 15. He doesn't show up till, let's see, when was this? This would have been Moses in the desert, 1500, somewhere in there. He doesn't show up for another almost 400 or 500 years. Agag. Well, the Lord's done that before, right? He mentions Cyrus. by name, several times, by the way, Cyrus, 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 in the book of Isaiah. And so he can do that, but is that what he's doing? Well, let's watch, because if I remember right, Agag was a nobody. Agag was taken by King Saul, remember? And he wasn't killed. So Samuel says, what is that bleeding I hear? Remember that? That's who Agag was. He was a nobody. So why is he mentioned here? Well, he is the king of the Amalekites, and that in itself is important. But there might be more. And his kingdom shall be exalted. Christ's kingdom. God brings him out of Egypt, and is for him like the horns of the wild ox. See that it is again? He shall eat up the nations, his adversaries, and shall break their bones in pieces and pierce them through with his arrows. He crouched like a lion. He lay down like a lion and like a lioness. Who will rouse him? Blessed are those who bless you, and cursed are those who curse you. You see the banners being played in there? I see him. This is that wonderful Christmas. Another Christmas parable, prophecy. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. It will crush the head of Moab. Okay, so I'm going to go over here in my list, and I'm going to put Moab. And break down all the sons of Sheth. Edom. I'm going to put Edom over there. Edom. This is one of the most ancient prophecies of the kingdom of God, of Christ coming and decimating his enemies, and even a little bit more than that we'll talk about. Edom shall be dispossessed. In other words, somebody is going to take their place. Seir, also his enemies, that's the mountains of Edom, shall be dispossessed. Israel is doing valiantly. So that's who's doing it. Israel. And one from Jacob shall exercise dominion and destroy the survivors of the city. It may be Christ. It may be somebody appointed by him. Now, I reminded you of 1 Samuel 15, and Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as far as Shur. Shur is down south in the desert along the Red Sea, which is east of Egypt. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive and devoted to destruction all the people with the edge of the sword. That's what Saul did. But did Saul devote Agag to the destruction of the sword? Remember? No, he did not. In fact, that was the sin. That was one of the sins that Saul did. He didn't kill the king. Numbers 24 in the Septuagint. Now, Joe and I had an interesting conversation. Just happened the other day. We just happened to have a conversation about the Septuagint the other day. And Joe, do you want to give just a minute about the Septuagint?
No, when I came across it at Bible college and taking Greek, I thought it was a really rotten translation of the Old Testament, because so many passages were different. It was translated by Jews who spoke Greek back and put in the Library of Alexandria before the time of Christ, 100 BC or something like that.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, it would be a pretty strange translation. But then in Bible college, I was reminded that Christ quoted from it. And most of the quotes you see in the New Testament are from the Greek Septuagint. Yeah. And if you ever wonder why the quotes don't seem to match up perfectly to the Old Testament, like that you have, it's probably because they're quoted from the Septuagint.
Right.
So, I mean, so Christ himself validated it, and Septuagint seems to give us just another kind of perspective, more information.
Yeah, yeah. And at least something to play with.
Yeah.
Another translation, and I think a good one. The Septuagint, in that same verse, water shall flow from his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters, and his king shall be higher than Gog, and his kingdom shall be exalted. Now, you and I have been through here several times the last few years, studying Ezekiel 38 and 39. And there's one set of verses, there's a few of them in there that are very interesting. One of them is this, speaking, Ezekiel 38:17, speaking of Gog. Thus says the Lord, are you he of whom I spoke in former days? By my servants, the prophets of Israel, who in those days prophesied for years that I would bring you against them? The problem is, in our translation and in the Hebrew translation, the current Hebrew translation, you cannot find Gog prior to Ezekiel. You can't find the word, the name. So all of a sudden, we have to come up with some kind of, what does this mean? And there was a couple kind of a decent ideas or whatever, but it doesn't, they just don't lay too good with some people like me, because I'm an overanalyzer, Our Hebrew text comes from the Masoretic text, written 1,200 to 1,400 years ago, almost 1,000 years after Jesus. So when you pick up your Old Testament, in general, depending on what translation you have, your translation was written about 1,000 years after Jesus. And like Joe's saying, and others are saying, well, where did Jesus quote? And Luke, where did Luke get his information? And all these people get these Old Testament quotes. Where did Peter get his quotes from the Old Testament? Did he get it from the Masoretic text? It wasn't around. It wasn't around. What was around? Well, maybe some other things, but we know the Septuagint was around. In 1947, finding the Qumran Dead Sea Scrolls pushed the manuscript history of the Hebrew Bible back 1,000 years. Dead Sea Scrolls were written between 150, some are now saying older, 200 to 250 maybe, up to almost 70 AD, 68. 68 is very interesting. The year 68 is 2 years before the falling of the temple. And you know that the Essenes were in Qumran. They were writing these scrolls over and over and over. Some people are saying they're burying treasure and they're keeping the laws of God because they love him and they're waiting for the end. But they thought the end was coming. And they buried all the Dead Sea Scrolls. When they found those in 1947, they found the oldest text of Isaiah, the whole scroll of Isaiah. So the Septuagint says Gog, and by the way, Amos 7 uses Gog to talk about the king of the caterpillars. So there's two ancient, and this is the most ancient verse talking about Gog. Now, real briefly, what does that mean? Gog, now, if it is ancient, is could be very well a picture of the Antichrist. And that helps you understand Ezekiel a little more. Maybe being a two-part war. Ezekiel 38 and 39, I believe, and I've come to believe, are a two-part war. And we can talk about that more, but my thoughts have kind of evolved that way because of the language there, and because I think some of it's ancient. And so we can talk about that at some point. So, any questions there right now?
Just a comment.
Yeah.
What has God wrought? That was the first official message sent on the Morse code when it was presented to the capital of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a quotation from Balaam
Yep.
in Numbers 26:26.
Mm-hmm. King James, yeah.
King James.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah, King James, yeah. This is why it's interesting. If you go to, I use Bible Hub, and I always say that, but if you use Bible Hub, it's going to give you about 20 translations of a verse. And you go down Numbers 24:7, go all the way down, and you're not going to see the word Gog except for one translation, and it's the Septuagint, an English rendering of the Septuagint. Because when the King James, in particular, when the King James came out, it changed everybody's thinking about translations, and they all kind of followed suit. we're going to see a little bit more of that as we go on, because it does damage. There is a great lesson out by Andy Woods. You should write his name down, Andy Woods, and talking about the translation of 2 Thessalonians 2, about the rapture. And he makes some great cases that there's some terms that we never used before the King James Bible. All the other Bibles, you can go back to some ancient Bibles, or what we call ancient, but 1400s, 1500s in there that are some very interesting translations, and all of a sudden the King James changes something and everybody uses it. And that's not the way to do translation. So
Said Andy Woods?
Andy Woods, yeah. Just for instance, I'll just throw it out there just for instance, because it'll just go sideways. You want to go sideways a little bit here? So, yeah, some people go, yeah, let's go sideways. So, in 2 Thessalonians 2, some of you know where I'm going with this, the word is apostasy. The apostasy. But it has an article in front of it. The apostasy. In other words, it is something that is stuck. It's like saying the president. You know who the president is, right? So if I come to you and I say, listen, let me teach you about the apostasy, and then I go away and I come back a year later and I said, you remember me talking to you about the apostasy? And you would say, yeah, the apostasy. But if you weren't here in the class, you'd go, apostasy? I don't know what you're talking about. When Paul's writing in 2 Thessalonians 2, he says, the apostasy, that word means a departure.
Isn't it the same root word for apostle
No,
and apostasy?
no. Apostasy, so here's it. Stemi is the root. Stemi means to stand. Okay? Apo means to stand or away from standing. You're not standing anymore. Okay? Apo means you're not standing anymore. Now, so if I was to say stop standing in the faith, see? Now you've mentioned the faith. So when Paul says the apostasy, he's not saying the faith. He didn't say there's a rebellion or an apostasy from the faith. He said there's a departure, the departure. And Andy Woods is saying that is a specific term for the rapture, because Paul taught them about the rapture, and it is the departure of the church. And so anyway, it's an interesting lesson. Maybe we'll get into it more. But my point is that it takes good study from these people who are putting these things together and try to hash out some of this stuff that makes sense, and trying to work through some things that don't make sense. And right now, I'm working on something that never made sense to me. And that is, Israel is going to bring a sword to their enemies, and people are thinking that's going to be tomorrow or the next day or something. Well, that may be to Iran right now. There's something cooking up over there. I don't think so. In fact, over the last couple months, we've seen that Israel is going to beat up on these enemies, and there's more to come. Zechariah 9. Against Damascus. The Lord will strip her of her possessions and strike down her power on the sea, and she shall be devoured by fire. The king shall perish from Gaza. So now he's talking about Damascus in the north in Syria, the capital city, which is over 2,000, longer than that, 3,000 years old, if I remember right. 2,500 to 3,000 years, I think that city is. It's never fallen. It's been taken, but it never fell. Then now he goes down the coast to Gaza, clear down to the south. You know where Hamas is, clear down in southern Israel. And then Ashkelon is in the middle. Ekron was a big city there in the middle. And they will be like the Jebusites. You know the Jebusites? They were taken by David, and David decimated them and took the capital, Jerusalem. He renamed it to Jerusalem. So now, let me add to the list here, because now you have Gaza, and we're gonna throw Philistia in there. Philistia is the Philistines, right? And I think that's fine. Ashkelon is a city along there in the Philistine area. Verse 8, then I, God, he, God, will encamp at my house, as a guard. This is great. so that none shall march to and fro. Now, when does that happen? Lord, you've never done that. In fact, you've deserted. Ezekiel 10, you left Jerusalem. You should read Ezekiel 10 if you haven't read it. He left, and he hasn't returned, except he tried to return in Jesus, and Jesus went up, and he found the temple empty, and then they killed him. Okay, so he left again. The principle of separation. You don't want me? Okay, I'm leaving you to your enemies. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold your king. There's another Christmas. I love this. Behold, your king is coming to you, righteous and having a salvation. Is he humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey? Easter, sorry. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem. He's saying there's not going to be any more war that comes against my northern tribes, Israel or Judah, Jerusalem. He's going to cut them off. And the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace to the nations after this is all over. His rule shall be from sea to sea and from river to the ends of the earth. This is mystical, right? This is like God's going to be in heaven, and nobody's going to be doing this. See, whenever you see a wording about the hand of the Lord, the face of the Lord, his feet, him riding on a donkey, any of those things, it is literal. His throne, he will have a city, he will have a special place and a special people. He is coming back in the person again of Jesus Christ the resurrected. Oh, this is awesome. And he's going to rule from sea to sea. As for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Return to your stronghold, O prisoners of hope. Today I declare I will restore to you to double. I think that this idea of prisoners of hope is both spiritually and physically. I think that they are prisoners of hope right now. They're hemmed in on every side. They're going to be further hemmed in. Satan is going to hem them in. The Antichrist is going to hem them in Basra. And I think that when he comes back, that's where they're at, and he's going to release them. For I have bent Judah my bow. One of the tribes, Christ, is the head of the tribe. But one of the tribes is being bent as a weapon. I have made Ephraim its arrows. I will stir up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece, and wield you like a warrior's sword. Now, I've been looking for a long time, and I've read this a few times, and I think, was it Gary and I and Bob and Bruce were the other day doing our little coffee cup meeting, and we started talking, and I remembered that Yvonne is Greece. And then I remembered to look into this. This is honestly is one of the most outstanding verses to suggest that Christ is coming back, and he's going to use, and remember, Ephraim and Judah are going to be put together like a stick, according to Ezekiel and another place. I can't remember which one. But they're going to be put together, never to be broken up again. And he's going to use them as a weapon. He's going to use them as a weapon. Against Greece? We met Alexander, right? Because he's still alive someplace on the earth. Where's he? This word is a really bad translation. It's useful in some places, but there's no such word as Greece. Genesis 10. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Yavon, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. The sons of Yavon, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. From these the coastland people spread in their lands. Yavon is Western Turkey and Greece, and what we would suggest is now up a little further than that. Now you can incorporate Greece into that, but it's not just Greece. So when you're reading through there and you see Daniel chapter 11 or 12, now I get mixed up, where the prince of Greece shows up, there's no prince of Greece. There's a prince of Yavon. When you come to Greece in your Bible, you should write Yavon. And it means this area and could very well mean Turkey. Now, what does this mean? Well, first of all, just a side note here. I like side notes, like sidebars, right? All of these are the coastlands, people. Look at where Tarshish is, and Kittim. Tarshish shows up over and over and over and over. They have the big ships. And so did Kittim. And Kittim is another word that is used primarily for Rome. And you're going to see Rome play out in Daniel as well, in the book of Daniel. Okay? But Tarshish is very important. And they moved along the coast and went out. But so there's the prince of Yavon. Now, this prince of Yavon is coming against Israel. Well, remember what we did last week when we talked about Constantinople? And we talked about the right leg, or actually if you're looking at the left leg of the statue, and this section of the Roman Empire. And now you've got this prince here who Michael had to go up against. He was holding back Gabriel. Gabriel had to call for Michael's help, and Michael came and released and got him released. This is a bad area and a bad deal, and right now you have a very bad guy ahead in Turkey. So, Yavon. Now, when did did Israel go up against them? Never. And by the way, this Zechariah 9 is future anyway. It's talking about Christ. It's talking about Ephraim and Judah being put together. And then at the end of this period, this is what I'm talking about. At the end of this period, when this happens, that bow and arrow, Judah and Ephraim, they go against Yavon. Now, again, you don't hear people talking about this, but this is the kind of stuff that drives me crazy, because they're not making sense to me that Jesus Christ is there and Israel is involved in this war. And now Israel is reaching out as far as Yavon. And we've seen Moab and Edom along the coast, and yeah, they're going to fight them over and over and over, but they've never fought Yavon. Zephaniah 2. Gaza shall be deserted, and Ashkelon shall become desolate. Now, so this is along the coast again of Israel. Ashdod's people shall be driven out at noon, and Ekron shall be uprooted. O Canaan, land of the Philistines, again, and I will destroy you until no inhabitant is left. Are there inhabitants in Philistine right now? In Gaza? In Ashkelon? Yes. The sea coast shall become the possession of the remnant of the house of Judah. A possession of the remnant. Not the unbelieving Jews, not the nation that has come back in disbelief, but the saved remnant at the end of time. For the Lord their God will restore their fortunes. I have heard the taunts of Moab and the revilings of the Ammonites. Okay? Ammon. Where's Ammon? Jordan. Okay? Moab is Jordan. And they will be like Gomorrah, a land possessed by nettles and salt pits and waste forever. The remnant of my people shall plunder them, and the survivors of my nation will possess them. You also, O Cushites, so let's add Cush. Where's Cush? in Africa. They're in Eastern Africa. They're in the Ezekiel war. You also, O Cushites, shall be slain by the sword, and he will stretch out his hand against Assyria. The Assyrian. Keep it in mind. So there's our list. There's our list. And there's more that could be added to that if we went back and took them all from the couple months that we've been looking at this. So there's just a partial list. And I hope it's pretty clear that something's going to happen in the future and Jesus Christ is there. Isaiah chapter 11. The root of Jesse is there with Israel when this happens. Okay? This guy, memory, if you never checked out a good source, memory is a good source. Austin, you got something?
I don't know if this may mean anything, but Yavon's meaning in the Hebrew language, I think, is deceiver, one who makes sad. Do you think that might have anything to do with it?
Could very well. Yeah, good. I'm going to mark that down. Thanks, Austin. I like the. Where did you find that?
Google. Quick Google search.
Would you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Would you look up Abarim, A-B-A-R-I-M,
A-B-A-R-I-M.
and then look up Yvonne, okay? And see what they say. That's a good one, Austin. Okay, memory. Jordanian, this is the Jordanian, this is the Ammon, the Moabites and the Ammonites and whatever. The Jordanian minister here, a military conflict with Israel should be a strategic option. If we don't die for Palestine and Jerusalem, what is the point of life? This is what's called, again, what Ezekiel says is the eternal hatred. It's what they live for. You cannot fight this ideology. That's why every time the United States goes over, I was watching some of the Baghdad history of Saddam Hussein and other things, and just we are so ignorant. They have a very, very long memory, and ours are about that short. Because we don't know their history, we don't know how to be involved. We should not be over there. We shouldn't have got into the Iraq war. I will say that I was for it because I thought they had the weapons and there was going to be problems, but find out they weren't there. We're not sure totally. My point is that we don't know what we're doing over there a lot of times. So, on to the 83 war. The Psalm 83 war. A psalm of Asaph. You can find him in 1 Chronicles 25. He's a prophet of David. Let me read this. O God, do not keep silent. Do not hold your peace or be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make an uproar. Those who hate you have raised their heads. They lay crafty plans against your people. They consult together against your treasured ones. They say, come, let us wipe them out as a nation. Let the name of Israel be remembered no more. For they conspire with one accord against you. They make a covenant. The tents of Edom, the tents and the Ishmaelites. Okay, Edom is over in southern Jordan. Okay, down by the southern section of the Dead Sea. The Ishmaelites are Saudi Arabia. Could be even more so southern Saudi Arabia. Some suggest could lead into Yemen, but Saudi Arabia. Moab, again, is Jordan. The Hagrites, and I'll show you a map here. Gebal and Ammon and Amalek. Philistia with the inhabitants of Tyre along the coast. Asher also has joined them. They are the strong arm of the children of Lot. Selah. Don't you love the Selah? Selah is stop what you're doing, push everything else out of your head, and think about what I just said. That's what God is saying. That's what David would say in his Psalms. This is what Asaph is saying. I'm pausing and I'm meditating on what has been said. Do to them as you did to Midian in the book of Judges, as to Sisera and Jabin at the river Kishon, who were destroyed at Endor, who became dung for the ground. Make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb. All of these are in the book of Judges. And their princes like Zebah and Zalmunna, who said, let us take a possession for ourselves and the pastures of the land of God. Now, wait a minute. This is really interesting. Because, wait a minute, they hate us and let us just do away with them, but they also want possessions, which, again, you're going to see over and over and over. I looked up the word plunder and loot and steal today, and it's all over in there. They're coming to do it, but guess what? God says you're going to do it to them. God says Israel's going to do it to them. Read Isaiah 17 again, all the way to the end. Let us take possession for ourselves of the pastures of God. O my God, make them like whirling dust, like chaff before the wind, as fire consumes the forest, as the flame sets the mountains ablaze. So may you pursue them with your tempest and terrify them with your hurricane. Stop, Selah. Stop. They didn't say that, I did. Stop. Where have we seen this? In all of this stuff back in Deuteronomy and other places where the tempest, remember, that's where the Lord rides. That's when he comes. And he terrifies them with your hurricane. Fill their faces with shame that they may seek your name, O Lord. Let them be put to shame and dismayed forever. Let them perish in disgrace, that they may know that you alone, whose name in the Lord, are the most high over the earth. By the way, that is Ezekiel 39. Now, here, you've been with me in the past. You've seen the big map of Magog and Gog and Beth Togarmah and Persia and Cush, and put all these big nations coming out of Africa and down from the north and over from the northeast. Those are the outward nations. And this is what's really got everybody stirred up. That none of these nations are involved in the Ezekiel war. There's none listed there. Cush is, but he's not listed. I don't think he was listed in Ezekiel 38, was he? I don't think so. Might be. Anyway, my point is that Ezekiel nations are out here. And this man, this prophet, is praying about these tribes, these people, right next to Israel. Now, here's my question. Is the Lord going to answer that prayer? Because we know it's a prayer. You think he'll answer that prayer? Let me ask you another question. Has he answered that prayer? Has he? No. He has not. But I've shown you over the last couple months, and just even some today, that he's going to. Read Zechariah 9, Zephaniah 2, Isaiah 17, and 11. He's going to do this, and it's still future. And I don't believe it's going to happen before. Now, please bear with me. Can there be a war tomorrow? Yeah. Iran is up against the wall. They've got major problems right now. They got bombed again today, and it's a big disaster. There could be a war and all this stuff. But what I'm suggesting to you is, whenever this stuff happens, it is God turning Israel into what is it? I'm trying to remember now. This came to me. I think it's Isaiah 49 or something. He's going to turn them into a threshing sledge. He's going to bend them like a bow and shoot them like an arrow to his enemies. And it is coming at the end of the tribulation because Jesus Christ is there. Deuteronomy 33, happy are you, O Israel, who is like you, a people saved by the Lord, the shield of your help and the sword of your trumpet. Your enemies shall come fawning to you, and you shall tread upon their backs. Is that the millennium? Is that when there's peace? Is that when everything's hunky-dory? It may be at the beginning of the millennium, but it's not generally in the millennium. I believe that this is coming at Christ's return, and then there's a period of time where he's going to take it out on his enemies literally. He's not going to stand there and say a word and everybody disappears. He's going to carry out a system, a series of battles. He's going to have Israel and Ephraim and Judah bent as a bow and arrow, and he's going to take care of them. And some of them he will take care of with the breath of his mouth, like the Antichrist. Isaiah 11. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch, and he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. Now, that's what we look at. We say, see, it's just going to happen like that. But watch this. In that day, the Lord will extend his hand yet a second time to recover the remnant. Is he going to bring a literal remnant? I think he's going to use a literal hand. Christ's hand. That the remains of his people. From, where's he bringing them from? Assyria, Egypt. That's Assyria is Persia and or Iran and Iraq area. From Egypt, from Pathros and Cush, which is over there in Africa. Elam is Iran, Shinar is Iraq, and from Hamath, which is up north, and from the coastlands of the sea. Ephraim shall not be jealous of Judah, and Judah shall not harass Ephraim, but they shall swoop down. Not he, not Christ. He's going to do it maybe, but they, Israel, will swoop down on the shoulder of the Philistines in the west, and together they shall plunder the people of the east. Iran, Iraq. They shall put out their hand against Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites shall obey them. Them. That hasn't happened, and it can't happen before Jesus Christ returns. Joel 3:6. To Tyre, Sidon, Philistia, you have sold the people of Judah and Jerusalem to the Greeks in order to remove them far from their own border. Behold, I will stir them up from the place to which you have sold them, and I will return your payment on your own head. Proclaim this among the nations, consecrate for war, stir up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords. Wait a minute, I thought it was the other way around. It is. It is, later. But first, let's use some swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am a warrior. Obadiah, thus says the Lord God concerning Edom, rise up, let us rise against her for battle. I will bring you down, declares the Lord. If thieves came to you and plunders by night, how you have been destroyed, how Esau has been pillaged, his treasures sought out. For the day of the Lord is near. See the timing of this? And this is the kind of stuff that Bill Salas and some others were talking about, that this is going to happen soon. No, it specifically says Jesus is there, and it specifically says the day of the Lord. It is near upon the nations. As you have done, it shall be done to you. Your deeds shall return on your head. For as you have drunk on my holy mountain, so all the nations shall drink continually. They shall drink and swallow, and shall be as though they have never been. But in Mount Zion there shall be those who escape, and it shall be holy. And the house of Jacob shall possess their possessions. The house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau stubble. They shall burn them and consume them, and there shall be no survivor for the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. Those of the Negev shall possess Mount Esau. Those of the Shephelah along the coast shall possess the land of the Philistines. They shall possess the land of Ephraim and the land of Samaria, and Benjamin shall possess Gilead. The exiles of this host of people of Israel shall possess the land of the Canaanites as far as Zarephath, and the exiles of Jerusalem who are in the Sepharad shall possess the cities of Negev. Nobody knows where that is, by the way. They did take that name to Spain, so they're really not sure where that is. Saviors, watch this, saviors shall go up to Mount Zion to rule Mount Esau, and the kingdoms shall be the Lord's. Remember what Micah said, that's 7 saviors, I think, 8 princes or something like that shall go up. And I think I'm going to stop there. We're almost done with this. We're almost done with this, and then we can go on. You know what? Let's just finish this. It's going to take 2 minutes, okay? 2 minutes. We'll be done. And we'll be done with this subject, and we might take one more week, and then we'll go on to something else. Zephaniah 2. I think we read that anyway, didn't we? Okay, let's just go to this. That was quick. Revelation 19. And this is where it comes down to you and me. He is dressed in his robe dipped in blood, and his name is the Word of God. and the armies of heaven. Who's that? Go like that. That's us. If you are in him, you are in heaven during the tribulation. He's going to come back with the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure. We know that's us because we were promised the bride's robe, okay? White linen, white and pure, on white horses. Remember I told you to have a name for your horse. From his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. This is where we think he just comes magically does those things. And he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty. Now look at verse 19. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against him. Finish the rest of the sentence. Who was sitting on the horse and against his army. Against his army. So, I think I probably will finish with this. We'll see what happens next week. But let me just suggest this. When we go up, we go to the Bema seat. We get our rewards for what we've done in the body in this life, both good and bad. The Bible's clear about that. Then we're in heaven for at least 7 years. I don't know how long that judgment seat takes. You know, I think we get to see all of our friends go and like 7 trillion other people. So we'll see what that looks like. But then there's a great wedding feast. And we go to the wedding feast, and then I believe we go into training. Who knows? We'll see. 2nd Chronicles, remember what we talked about? Chronicles, 1st Chronicles, actually chapter 20. That's how we started this. There's going to be training. You're going to be given something to do. We're going to come back. We're going to be the armies of heaven. And he's going to use Judah and Ephraim as his bow and arrow. And we're with him. And we know the Antichrist armies are coming against us. What are we going to do? Something. We're going to be there, and we're going to be doing something. Now, it might be Jericho, and you and I are the ones playing the violins or the harps or something. Who knows? But something drastic and imminent and real is coming. And we should all have a picture of something beyond what we, hear and just gloss over. I hope this gets you interested in more of the Old Testament and you can picture those kinds of things coming. Okay? Any questions or any last comments? I'm not sure where we're going to go next week. Might just tie this up. We'll see. But last things? All right. Lord, thank you so much for your grace and your mercy. We love you. We look forward to what you're going to do. We look forward to being a part of this army and whatever you want us to do there. I'm sure that when we get on the other side of ourselves, our flesh, we'll be more than grateful just to do whatever you have for us. Until then, I pray that everyone here and listening will will understand you as a rewarder of those who do the work of a missionary, who do the work of somebody who is trying to get somebody else to heaven. Lord, help us have that attitude. Help us be grateful to you and courageous for others. We pray this in your holy name. Amen.